This meeting is being recorded.
All right, thanks for coming to our meeting, everybody. This is on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural and Food Research Initiative grants program, specifically for sustainable agricultural systems, as you can see here on our first slide. This is a call that just came out in like the last week or so, and we are getting ready to gear up because we may want to produce some proposals here at ASU. So this is what we're calling an opportunity kickoff, where we share what we know about it, including any background and intelligence data. And I've also invited some experts who have both worked for USDA and worked with USDA to explain a little bit more about the USDA's mission. And then we're going to have somebody come and talk about, from a faculty perspective, working with USDA, specifically in the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative program. And then we'll review this actual call and some budgeting concerns. But ultimately, at the end of the meeting, what we want to do is have people in the room kind of get together and talk about maybe some of your ideas. And that's largely because they're only going to do 9 awards nationally. We're going to get to more of that later on. But we want to basically have a teaming discussion where we sort of coalesce around some ideas, and we expect there's probably going to be more than one team at ASU. That's just the reality. We just want to try to get people thinking about how you can partner with other people. So without further ado, I want to go to the next slide and introduce our speakers.
The clicker's right there.
Oh, sorry. We're going to talk about the United States Department of Agriculture. So if Kathleen and Suzanne are online, if you guys could introduce yourselves. Both have worked formerly at USDA in pretty high places, but I want them to say for sure who they are and tell us about USDA and what their mission is and working with them.
Need to unmute themselves.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm not in Arizona, but I'll be there soon. So I, in my previous life, had a couple of political appointments at USDA. The first was the last 2 years of the Clinton administration, where I was the Agricultural Marketing Service Agency Administrator. And the second was the first term of President Obama. I was the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, which is the #2 position at USDA, where I was the Chief Operating Officer and oversaw budgeting with Suzanne Palmieri, who has joined me at ASU and is in Washington today, and she was my Chief of Staff. And then she went on, she can say herself, but she went on and became the Associate Administrator of the Foreign Agricultural Service, and then on to Rome to represent USDA at the tri-agencies, FAO, EFAD, and World Food Program. So we're long in the tooth in USDA. Additionally, I worked for 6 years on the Senate Agriculture Committee when Patrick Leahy, the senator from Vermont, was chair. And in those 6 years, my beat, so to speak, was ag research. So I have a lot of history in the way USDA agricultural research agencies, names have changed, org charts have changed over that lifetime of work that I've had, but I'm pretty familiar with all of the different programs as they've evolved. We refer to this one as AFRI. This is how people pronounce the acronym. And there has been movement in years past to try to do fewer awards, make them bigger and multi-year. And that stemmed from complaints from university folks saying that they felt they were on a constant treadmill in the grant proposal processes, and they'd rather just get fewer opportunities and make them really count. You'll note that the RFP has an overhead ceiling of 30%, which if you're used to applying to NSF or NIH or other DOE, you realize that's much, much lower. It used to be 19%. I actually wrote that in law as part of the 1990 Farm Bill. So it has creeped up to now 30%, but it's certainly less than a lot of other agencies. I'm very interested in one little thing in reading this RFP, and that actually comes in the very first page. The authors of the document say that they had surveyed all the commodity type organizations. What did they call them? Commodity boards. So those are, those boards that represent industry, like beef, what's for dinner, the incredible edible egg, the research, promotion, marketing program boards that represent industry and what their research needs are. And interestingly, they say in the front piece, none of the topics submitted by the commodity boards are included in this RFA because the topics did not fit the subject matter of the RFA. I'm wondering if there's just still that divide with traditional ag, that sustainability is just not a sweet spot for them. And so maybe they were just struggling to come up with ideas that really target the goals of this RFP and make way for those of us at ASU to bubble up good ideas and perhaps be successful in this effort. How's that for an overview, Tobin? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's perfect. And then do you have anything I think most people understand the USDA mission, but could you give a quick word on how they fit in as opposed to not just as a funding agency, but really their overall purpose?
You're asking me, I missed the beginning of that question. What this is a NIFA proposal, and it is, so USDA now has two big research agencies. One is the Agricultural Research Service, and that is intramural funding. So federal labs, and they have a proposed budget every year, and Congress passes that budget. They're also hungry. They apply to NIFA offerings. NIFA is the competitive grant program arm of USDA. It stands for the National Institutes for Food and Agriculture, modeled after NIH, but never coming close to the kind of largesse of money that NIH has. If you look at USDA research dollars over time, if I said it was just a flat line, that would be a happy storyline compared to what it was in real dollars. Money in ag research has only gone down, which just to the issues around sustainability goes to the problem statement that more and more of land-grant university research is being funded by industry, and some critics would argue that therefore it diverts from public interest-focused research. The other two research agencies in USDA's portfolio that people are probably familiar with is NASS, the National Ag Statistics Service, where if you're writing grant proposals, you can garner a lot of really good data from the Ag Census that comes out every 5 years. And the last Ag Census was just released a few months ago, maybe even a couple months ago. And so if we're putting data in about state of food and agriculture, rural America, that's a go-to place for data. We should make sure it's the latest data. The other research agency, which has been in the news of late for controversial reasons, is the Economic Research Service. The administration has decided to move that out of Washington, D.C., where it's been located forever. And there has been a bidding process among states and institutions within states about having that, that smaller agency of economists move here and there. It's unresolved. There's been fierce pushback from career employees and from Congress. And right now we're just in a wait and see moment.
Okay. Great. I appreciate that overview. And then I think we want to move on. Is Tim online yet?
Oh,
I don't know. He was going to dial in on phone, so he might be.
Is it a local number?
480.
I'd imagine.
There is a 480-727 number.
Tim, are you online yet? I don't know if he is.
Okay, 41.
Okay, that's all right. He said he was going to be a little late. So we're going to go back to Tim. Tim Richards is an agriculture economist over in the Morrison School of Agriculture. He has been funded through AFRI several times. That's all I know about him at this point because I just met him via email this week. But we'll get more from him. He's going to talk a little bit more about what the program specifically is about. I think Kathleen touched on that quite a bit also, so that was good. This is their actual mission statement taken from their website and from the solicitation. So you see really what they're looking at and what their actual overall goal is. I'll give you guys all a second to read that. And then we'll come back when Tim's on and he can talk to you more specifically about what he did when he worked with them and through this initiative. So you're going to see some words up in here that I want to draw attention to that we're going to see again in the next several goals that I'm going to go over. And one is rural economies, another is food production, water availability, climate variability, food safety and security, human nutrition. These are all things that are part of this proposal. So this is the program area overview for sustainable agricultural systems. This is pertaining directly to this grant. So you have, at least as I understand it through the call, you have USDA, then you have DEFA under that, then you have AFRI under that, and then this is a program area within the program of AFRI. So the program purpose for this particular thing is, sustainable supply of abundant, affordable, safe, nutritious, and accessible food and other agricultural products. Again, we're seeing economic opportunities and also this theme of long-term health and well-being of all Americans. So it's pretty broad. Program goal number one is focused on increasing profitability in agriculture. That's why I highlighted that. And then they give you the how. I'll give you guys a second to read that. This list, just as we go through this, is by no means exhaustive. These are the high-level goals of the program. So when you're going through these, each project that you might propose or a team you might work with, address goals 1, 2, and 3, but also the additional requirements on pages 9 and 10 of the solicitation.
Hi, Tobin.
Hi, is that you, Tim?
It is. Actually, I was on the call from the start. Apparently, Zoom had muted me. So when you introduced me, I was yelling at my phone to no purpose. So I had to reboot and come back on. But yes, now I'm here.
Okay, great. My apologies then. So do you want to give an overview of your experience working with AFRI and a little bit about how that went?
I can. Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, I'm in the Morrison School. I'm an ag economist. I've been here for 25 years. Had quite a bit of success with AFRI and its predecessor, the National Research Initiative. Probably funded 15, 16 times, 5 times in the last 4 years. The track that we always do, there's several tracks within AFRI. The sustainability one that we're talking about today is relatively new. But we have traditionally done the markets and trade track. It typically gets about 100 proposals a year. They fund maybe 10 of them, 10 to 12 kind of idea. The structure is very similar. If we look at the RFP, and scroll down there, you can read the requirements for markets and trade, and it's much the same as what the sustainability is. But each program leader organizes separately, and one of our faculty, Troy Schmitz, is actually a faculty representative within the review team as a coordinator. But each one is reviewed independently within the process itself. So I can't speak exactly to what the pool of reviewers are going to look like for this one, but I would assume that the criteria and the standards are roughly similar across the different programs. And I think the couple take homes that I want to emphasize to this group that's important is that this is foundational research. This is basic research. This is something that is not, let's put it this way, it's not speculative in some sense. You have to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. To that point, a couple of years ago, they experimented with a different review process called the distributional review process. Instead of organizing a team at DC, 10 to 12 people to review all the proposals, they basically took the proposals and distributed among the submitters. It was interesting because we got to see what all the other proposals were like. And I tell you, that was everything from really, really good to really, really bad. But I got to see a good cross section of what made good and what made bad, and why we have been funded over time. But uniformly, the proposals that were the most successful and the highest quality were ones that were at a very late stage of completion, let's put it that way. And that's the way we always do it. We always start a paper, have it that forms the core of the proposal, not the whole thing, but the core. The paper is nearly completed by the time we actually do the proposal in terms of, the coverage of the literature. Most of what I do is empirical. So we will have already looked at the data, summarized the data, have a good sense of what's in it. So we can demonstrate that we have a really good sense of what we can get done with the data and what we're going to propose is possible. So we're a long way down the road before we actually submit the thing. And it's very rigorous. This is not research that is, I don't want to say it's not applied, because everything we do is applied, but it is also very, very basic research. Our research, we're economists, so it has a very strong theoretical component to it. And a lot of that stuff ends up being papers on their own. We always get 3 or 4 or 5 papers out of each one of these grants. So every one of them makes a contribution on a very fundamental level. The worst proposals were things that were just applications of what's already known. So I think we need to look at these proposals as, something that's going to make a significant contribution, that's going to be a top flight publication in its own right. In terms of the structure itself, the most successful ones that we have ever done, and I always structure them this way, they're always multiple stages. So there will be, when behavioral economics was big a couple of years ago, there would always be an experimental stage to it, always a theoretical component, always an empirical analysis of some sort, always some sort of simulation, policy conclusions, and synthesis of everything that we learn. So it's kind of, I don't want to say that there's a cookie cutter to getting it done, but that seems to be fairly successful. And in the 2016 round, actually out of the 120 proposals, ours were ranked number 1 and number 2. So apparently that works. What else can I say about that process? If you're not funded, I don't know if you have any experience with NIH, but it's, you submit, you get scored, you come back, you revise and resubmit kind of thing. There isn't a formal process for that at AFRI, but if it is rejected one year, you can resubmit the next year. And the cover page is basically a response to reviewers. As concise as possible. You address the concerns that the reviewers had, and then you present the proposal itself. And that a couple times in the past, we have been successful in that process. So it isn't an NIH-like process, but you can make it look that way. You can resubmit something that has been rejected in the past. So is that my 3 minutes?
Yeah, no, that was great, Tim. I appreciate it. So we will go through the call now. Thank you so much. And as I said, so we were on program goal 1. So within each of these goals, there's 2 sub-goals. And for goal 1, you have to address one or both. We didn't put them up here because I don't want too much on one slide for you guys to have to read. That's not useful for either of us. So moving on to goal 2, this is fostering economic development and prosperity. So yes, in rural America by catalyzing production of high-value bio-based chemicals. So again, for this one, you have to address 2 sub-goals, or all sub-goals and sub-bullets within that overall goal. And then program goal 3 is enhancing the prosperity and health of the nation. So again, you see that revisited from that first slide. And this, which I thought was interesting, and I don't know if Kathleen might have a comment on this. I actually was curious. So you see rural within this call a couple of times. It's almost like they're only interested in rural prosperity and health, but then randomly on some of these other things, they take out rural and they end up with just prosperity and health of the nation. So I'm wondering, is there a reason why that would be? Is there some sort of politicking going on here about being more interested in rural areas?
Yeah, USDA is generally more interested in rural areas. That's their beat. When I was deputy, we started to do, like, in the quietest of all ways, a little in urban agriculture. And we did it with great fear that members of Congress would come down hard on USDA for going in that direction. And the only real urban ag stuff that's been funded in any significant way now has been by the Foundation for Food and Agriculture, the FAR, which is related to USDA, but it's sort of a public-private partnership sort of thing that emanated from the Farm Bill. So in this case, program goal 3, Tobin, I think health, you know, there are arguably some differences between rural and urban health. For example, access to healthcare and the importance of telemedicine, for example. But generally, I don't think you have to put in the rural. If we decided as a group we wanted to do urban, we'd have to figure out how to do that so that it didn't send up any red flags at USDA.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I wanted to know, because I was thinking in terms of proposal, is urban ag out just because of this qualification, or could we do more? It's just we have to make sure, as you said. Okay, thank you so much for helping me with that. And then also one of the things within goal 3 is they want to emphasize technologies, tools, education. Whatever you propose ultimately needs to focus on this. So that's just, and by this we mean the access to sufficient quantities of safe, nutritious, affordable food insofar as it relates to prosperity and healthcare of the nation. So this, I believe, is going to be something near and dear to several people on this call's heart, but this is one of the biggest requirements, which is why I made it a giant slide here. You have to use an agricultural systems approach. So this is inclusive of the value chain from production to consumption. So you don't want to just be proposing piecemeal ag projects, which there are better calls for both within AFRI and elsewhere. What they're really looking for is this overall systems approach. And that's one reason I have Kathleen and Suzanne on the call, because that's really where they're specialty-wise. As part of this, you're going to consider strategies and technical interventions that may alter existing systems. And so that as part of that, you want to consider unintended consequences. That's very important with any systems project, but especially with this one because they called it out. They also talk about recognizing and using the convergence of rapidly advancing science and technology platforms. So this could be for those of you who are not necessarily agricultural systems specialists. You could definitely incorporate things that you do with engineering and biology and bioengineering and biotech. So they've given examples of biotech, nanotech, information science, cognitive science, and then they also add on their public engagement. So of course that doesn't mean that you have to be doing biotech specifically also. Again, as part of this systems approach, you have to consider economic, environmental, and community well-being. That's throughout all these slides, and that goes back to those unintended consequences. You want to include efforts that enhance education and training for the current and next generation of farmers, workers, and scientists. So that's important because it's not just about implementing some sort of one-size-fits-all solution and you think you have the answer to every ag system problem. It's about really more of being bigger than that. And as part of this, we found this out from the webinar, not one project is going to address the whole value chain or solve every problem. And even though that may be obvious from the nature of a systems type of approach, they just call that out specifically emphasizing that you're going to work in concert with other selected teams. So you might have 9 teams that win. You may not work with all 9 at some point, but they want you to be aware of who's out there and what sort of research they're doing. I also think this is important from a strategic perspective, because that would suggest you probably don't want to propose the same thing as another school is proposing unless you think that you can do it that much better, or the ASU can do it that much better. And then part of that education and training is equipping them with new skills, new technologies, new training, and new experiences. So Kathleen, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this? I didn't expect that you had to. I just figured if you wanted to give any input.
Sorry, I'm working on that mute button. No, I think you've covered it really well, Tobin. I will say that since we are the Sweetie Center for Sustainable Food Systems, there may be an opportunity to use the new center as an umbrella organization to bring a few different ideas together in some sort of whole under that heading, since it's very apropos to the RFP.
Okay, great. And then I have a follow-up question for you for that. If I know we have people from all over campus here and multiple people from engineering schools. If they're doing some sort of research that might be more specific as a specific technology or training or experience, how would you conceive of that feeding into an overall ag systems approach, either within Sweetie Center or within this specific call?
Well, I guess I'd have to know a little bit more what it is. So, for example, I'm really bad at email, everybody. I'm sorry, but I had an email from the head of our biodiversity center on campus about this call. And I do some biodiversity work around true cost accounting, and it's going to be one of the prime focus areas for research in the next couple of years for Sweetie. And I thought, well, and with this report that just came out on the loss of biodiversity, it seems like that should be part of whatever this is. I think if we sort of see what's out there, what people are really shopping, that's the big intellectual journey, is to figure out how we could knit some things up in a compelling way. I just don't know how to respond to that, Tobin, not knowing what's out there.
No, that's totally fair. I didn't either. So I didn't know if we had any obvious answer. I didn't think there would be one, but I figured I'd ask. So, okay, so moving on to the next. I apologize for the low res of this image. We had to strip it from, was this from their YouTube webinar? Oh, so it's like a screenshot of a tiny res. Okay. So if we find this in higher resolution, we will send it to you guys. But this is for the agricultural system as a whole. Tara, do you know more about this? You want to go ahead and take us away from here?
Yeah, sure. So what you're seeing here in the Venn diagram is that convergence of the human, the natural resources, and the production. And they're really pushing that transdisciplinary aspect of the teaming in the system that you're going to address. So they're looking for that convergence of the biological, the physical, with the social, and the economic. And thinking through that whole life cycle from rural to production to consumption, from rural to urban. So this is that image that they use to help proposers just think about how they're viewing an agricultural system.
Okay, great. And I just realized for everybody who's here, we didn't introduce ourselves. I am Tobin Spratt. This is Tara Morley. We're proposal managers. She works largely with engineering. I work with all of campus. I'm based out of Knowledge Enterprise. And then this is Anne Marie over here, who is the research administration manager within GEOS currently. So that's why we're kind of leading this, is this is sort of a part of what we do. So, all right, Tara is going to now talk about specifically what's in the solicitation.
Sure. So an interesting thing, I guess, to note about this solicitation is that this is the second year of the SAS program. The awardees from the FY18 competition have not yet been announced. And so what they did mention is that they received 63 applications for that, for FY18. They've selected 8 awardees, so that's about a 12% selection rate. They're currently negotiating with those teams, and their abstracts and announcements of the teams will be forthcoming once all of that is finalized. So I think in concert with the 9 teams that should come out of this selection, thinking about how that larger synergy happens across teams to meet the longer term goals that are set by the program. Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to lift somewhat off of Tobin and what Kathleen said. A lot of this is drawing obviously directly from the solicitation and the webinar. You can find that webinar link off the program page. We'll list it as well with the materials. I felt like the webinar gave a little bit more depth to the words on the page. You got some other information. So here, not to belabor what can be read, we'll just kind of go through a couple of the high points. So here, you're looking for projects that are going to significantly improve the supply of affordable, safe, accessible, nutritious agricultural products, thinking through that whole scope of the value chain from production to consumption. They want you to consider the current needs as well as anticipation of the future impacts. Like Tobin said, taking into account unintended impacts. They want you to address current successes and challenges to those successes, as time continues. So they really want you to kind of have that holistic view. Of course, the societal benefits piece is another big component here, including promotion of rural prosperity and enhancing quality of life. Through the 3-function aspect of your project, the research, education, extension, that's really where they want you to see bringing those 3 together, and the extension piece is a huge part of this. You have to address, and as this being an integrated project, you need to address research, education, and extension with no one aspect there taking more than 2/3 of your budget. So you have to think through how you'll be integrating those activities. And now I'm lost without the clicker. Okay.
Can I jump in there for a second on the on those 3 functions?
Yeah.
I would say if I were an 1890 college, a minority serving institution, I might get away with having more emphasis on education and extension. But I think when ASU sends in a proposal, it's foremost research, and they want to have education and extension as a component of bringing that research, so it's not just a basic lab research kind of thing, and get the results out there. But it's not really, my personal opinion is it wouldn't be feasible to do something that's 2/3 extension or 2/3 education and have a small piece research. This is really a research program.
Thank you. Please feel free to jump in on any of these. I pulled out some of the bullets.
All right, so that being said, I sat on a couple of panels for the Water for Agriculture program. I've seen proposals that were dropped out because they didn't properly address education and extension. So,
can you introduce yourself for those of us that don't?
Peter Fox from
Okay.
School of Sustainable Engineering and Coastal Environment.
Thank you.
But I'm saying you can't just give it lip service. It's something that you have to start working on early.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is Kathleen again. I agree with that. It has to be real, but I just don't want anyone to spend a lot of time working on a proposal that's primarily education focused, because I just don't think that will fly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so looking at through the research lens, you must be doing a problem-centered project, and you have to justify why you chose that system, why the scope, and why the components that you're going to be examining. You have to provide to them your prioritization process for how you came to that, in terms of what you're going to be investigating and how. You have to demonstrate alliance with the priorities in the Farm Bill, again, pushing your transdisciplinary approach to how you'll be doing this. And they do want for the education and extension activities that you do propose to be meaningfully integrated with your research. Here they mentioned any postdocs or graduates that you propose to work on your project, they're going to fall and be accounted for under your research budget. That's not considered education for the purposes of this solicitation. They have specific parties and groups that they want the education targeted to. So your research students won't count in that respect. And then, of course, drawing that line between impact on the local, regional, and national level. Okay. So here, extension, as they've defined it, is acts or processes that deliver science-based knowledge or informal education to people, enabling them to make informed decisions. So they're looking for a high degree of engagement between the research teams, other personnel, stakeholders that are impacted by your problem, community needs, strategies that incentivize change in terms of land use, crops, systems, any new technologies that come into play, and doing that through an innovative approach and disseminating those results in a way that's meaningful to these groups. Sample activities that they list for education, they're talking curriculum development, new experiential learning opportunities, development of leadership skills, and here they're looking for decision-making, critical thinking, things like that, provision of online resources, citizen science gets mentioned, development of new applications, and educational games. So they do want for you to target diverse populations of students, specifically calling out the socially disadvantaged and non-traditional on the education piece. And again, any research students on your team will not count under the education budgeting aspect here. Okay, and here we've called out, so there's a letter of intent due in early June, kind of has a prescribed set of requirements here, what they do want you to include and don't want you to include, that kind of thing. June 4th is the date for that. They anticipate notifying teams in late June on the 28th, and then a full proposal is due late September, I believe on the 26th.
Yeah.
So here, just back there.
Sorry.
In terms of, here you'd be naming who's the lead and your collaborating investigators, working with any EPSCoR state institutions, and minority serving is to your benefit in terms of how your team will be reviewed. And then, in pages 2 and 3 of the letter of intent is where you will give them some depth into your project, and you have certain prescribed questions to answer here.
We should add the EPSCoR list for USDA is different every year, and I found their latest one, and there's people that were on it last year that are not on it this year and vice versa. So if you want that information, you can come find us, or you can Google it also. But
thanks. Okay, so that's the letter of intent, and then moving forward, assuming full selection, we're not going to go into all these details here, but just wanted to kind of lay out for everybody what is required in terms of pulling together your complete application. The go back, so an 18-page narrative. The logic model, management plan, and data management plan are kind of called out as documents that will require some extra attention in terms of teaming and thoughts for how you will do your project. They want to see a stakeholder advisory board. So that's something to think of as you get your thoughts together. Stakeholders, partners, other professionals. You need to account for an external evaluator. They want an evaluation plan so you can ensure that you're having impact. A lot of mention of key indicators and metrics. So another, thinking about how you're going to capture progress. The data management plan addresses your plans for making data available publicly. And then the logic model. And that we're going to get into, I guess, in a little bit towards the end of this meeting here. But the logic model is USDA's way of helping you think through how your activities will result in outputs and result in outcomes in the short, mid, and long term. And that is of some importance to them. Okay, and we're not going to go through the project narrative right now, but there are just, again, prescribed points you need to pay attention to throughout those 18 pages. And then evaluation criteria, this I just pulled, so please, Kathleen, jump in if you have anything else to add. The project's going to be evaluated in a 2-tiered process, through a strict admin compliance and then the peer review, and they're going to be looking at the merit of the science, education, and extension, qualifications of your team, and the project management approach, which again, I think those components of the stakeholder advisory board, your evaluation plan, all feed into that. Relevance, of course, and any teams that have a Center of Excellence status, that is reviewed favorably. We were really struggling to get details on who has Center of Excellence status currently. I don't know, Kathleen, if you have anything to add on that.
I do not.
Okay.
That list isn't secret, is it? Because we looked for about 10, 15 minutes.
And how do you get on the list?
Right.
Well, there's something in the RFP about how to get on the list. It's not secret, but I can't remember. I know that I've seen a small handful have been designated as centers of excellence, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, good to know.
Yes, that'll bear a little further investigating. Yeah, and here they do make mention that the review selection committee will be kind of broadly based in terms of technical expertise, some other external members, and from varying organizations. So a pretty broad mix of folks on the peer review. Okay. Yeah, with that.
All right. Everybody wants the money. So how are we going to give you the money? There are some pretty clear guidelines that are standard. 90 million. So that's 10 million for 9 awards. It's going to be a 5-year program. And as we've mentioned earlier, 2/3 of a project budget can't be in one of those 3 focus items, which is research, education, and extension. If you veer from those 3, you are required to have a 1-to-1 cost share match. So in my years at ASU, I can look into my crystal ball and tell you that you are not going to get the cost share approved very easily if you choose to not follow the directive plan. And so you are going to need to make plans for that in advance, very, very far in advance, because it's going to have to run up very large flagpoles to get those permissions. So be aware of that and make sure that you're trying to avoid the cost share component of it. As Kathleen mentioned, only 30% of the indirect costs are allowed to be charged to this program, which is great for you guys because that gives you more money to actually spend doing your program. A couple of things that I think are really important to note is that the budget, while it can sometimes be a last-minute addition or you're not giving it very much attention, it needs to be telling the same story as your narrative, as your logic plan. Your external evaluator needs to be put in there, and you need to really show that you've thought thoroughly through the evaluation program. Your board, are they going to be getting stipends for being involved? There's a lot of details, so I would suggest contacting your administration team in your home unit early as you're thinking through things, even at the LOI stage, because they're going to be able to really inform and help you navigate through the narrative in your program as you're developing it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. We still want to have time for everybody to discuss at the end, so I'm going to breeze through this next thing. The letter of intent is due June 4th. USDA deadline is September 26th. The ORSPA deadline is September 23rd, and the cost share requests are due August 23rd. I don't know why I put this information in here twice, so sorry, guys. We should add in, you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Notifications for the letters in response for the letters of intent are supposed to be issued by USDA on about June 28th. So that's when you'll hear for those. And then Tara, you don't have to get like it's approved or anything as part of that process, did you? It's just a matter that they're going to acknowledge receipt.
They said they would be notifying the teams on June 28th.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So one thing I would suggest is once you submit the letter of intent, keep working on your project. Don't stop and wait for the notification at the end of the month, because that's 3 weeks that you're going to miss working.
Yes, and that's part of this last point is you should have a proposal calendar in mind when you're doing this. Don't wait until the last minute, especially on these big proposals that have a huge system involvement and are probably going to involve multiple universities and multiple people. We will probably, within our office in Terra, be working with some teams. We don't know how we're going to arrange that yet because we can't work with everybody. But you'll have some help on campus, and certainly no matter who you are, you'll have help from your unit level research administration staff. Also, follow your proposal calendar. That's important. You can create one all day and night, but if you keep telling yourself, oh, I'm going to meet that deadline, I'm going to meet that deadline, and then you keep making excuses, and we all do it, myself included, it's not really all that useful in terms of getting everything out the door. And the reason is that if the more of those internal deadlines you meet translates into a higher quality proposal, you're more likely to win. So with that said, we want to now move into a teaming discussion. So we weren't sure how many people were going to be on this call. If it was as few as we originally anticipated, we were going to kind of breeze through things and spend more time doing teaming because we figured most people would be in the know about USDA and AFRI. But since we've had a broader audience, I wanted to spend more time on that. So we don't have a ton of time left, but I want you guys to be able to interact with each other and think about ways in which you could team with others at ASU and work your projects together. And again, as I said, that doesn't mean everyone has to be on the same team. That might not be realistic in many cases, but you probably shouldn't turn in a proposal by yourself or just with one or two other people without at least talking to the other people. So that's why we have you all in a room. So as Tara mentioned, what you want to do, in one way to help think about your teaming is think of this in the way that you have the logic model. If you've got an aim here and you don't have the expertise to address that aim, then you probably need to find somebody with the team, the participants. If you know you have a task here and you don't have the expertise, you probably need to find somebody to participate. Same thing with the outputs, and then same thing with the short, midterm, and long-term impacts. How are you going to measure those? Would you need somebody in addition to your team? Think about those. Maybe you really understand the short-term impacts while your research deals with the short-term impacts, but doesn't really deal with the long-term impacts. So things like that. So without further ado, I don't know how we can.
I would actually be curious to see how many of you in the room are thinking that you would be leading an application going forward. Is anyone wanting to be the PI? Oof, that's a huge clamor towards the front of the room. Okay, so that leads me to assume then that everybody wants to be part of one and has something to offer. So I don't know if you guys have thought through how to do this, but wondering if you guys have thought more about what you would have to contribute. We only have 10 minutes, so not a lot of time to go around the room and talk about your expertise, but maybe we can give them 30 seconds to say who they are and what their expertise is.
That'd be the rest of the time with the size of this crew. I don't know. I mean, I think the better way is, so Kathleen and Tim, feel free to chime in too. Do either of you have any interest in organizing something through Sweetie Center or through Morrison School of Ag?
Yeah, well, as I said previously, I think with the Sweetie Center being our new entity for sustainable food systems, there's a lot of opportunity to leverage that. At least that we've decided that's a very important space for the university to leverage that for this proposal. So given that we're short on time, if people want to send me and copy Suzanne a one paragraph description of their research interests, we can put it together in one document and sort of think creatively with Tobin and team about an umbrella concept that might knit things together. We have an opportunity to apply for 10 million, but I also want to say that it's going to be very important that we have partners. I'd love to think that we could get a 1994 tribal community college to be a partner. There may be other partners. We're not a land grant, and I know we have the status that we can apply as if we were a land grant, but that money starts dwindling really quickly when you bring in other players. But I think that also strengthens our proposal. So that's the sort of stuff I'll be thinking about next week.
Great. And just to follow up to that, it's not like you have to decide today. By all means, just think about what it is you want to do. You can email Kathleen, you can email me. I'm still not sure who's going to lead this. It's at least from the proposal management perspective, but we're certainly trying to get something going sooner rather than later. And we also want to encourage you, if you aren't sure where your stuff fits in, also still speak up, because you never know. Tim, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? I don't know if you have any ideas or if you're still on.
Yeah, I'm still on. I'm always interested in these sorts of things. I would be on any team if anybody sees any value to me participating on there. But in terms of leading, I'm leading markets and trade and there's a new track in tactical sciences. So I'm working with a couple Fulton people out here on an application of robotics and labor shortage issues. So I don't think I'm going to have bandwidth this summer to do another one, but to lead another one, but I could easily participate on a team.
Okay, great. Thank you for mentioning that and clarifying. So,
and Tobin, if I can just add, just because Sweetie Center is offering, and I'm saying, sure, happy to organize and put in a proposal, ASU is not restricted to just putting in one proposal, as been said over and over again, and we may increase our odds of winning if we have more than one proposal go in. So even if we mix up some of the elements in different ways. So because I said that, I don't want to stop short anyone else who's looking to take a lead on a project.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I should note that I received emails from many faculty that couldn't be here due to the timing of the meeting. So I do have a list of those faculty and their expertise. I will reach out and have them email you, Kathleen, and I'm more than willing to help put together a document that we could send out so that hopefully we could maybe put some organization with some developing of teams.
okay.
Are these all just, I guess I didn't look at the RFP, are these all just $10 million center proposals, or are there different tiers and proposals that we're looking at?
They're looking to award $10 million teams.
Yeah, there are, if you're interested, other AFRI calls.
Right.
They're more project specific, but one that I received from somebody was like extremely specific, as in one of the projects was high altitude potatoes in Colorado. So being in Arizona and not being able to grow potatoes here probably don't qualify for that. But, that's just to give you an idea that there is other USDA funding. So that was part of the purpose.
Some of the other programs will have a $500,000.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I understand.
Yeah, they mentioned a foundational and applied sciences focused solicitation will be dropping in the near term, but they didn't say when. Smaller dollar amount.
The real reason I'm here is next month I'm going to a workshop with USDA. I got asked to serve on a panel on what might be a new program on doing managed aquifer recharge in agricultural lands.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Tobin, is there a plan to do review teams before we submit final proposals?
There will be for each individual team. So that would be part of the proposal process and calendar. It's too hard for me to commit to anything now. But what Anne Marie's referring to is we usually review proposals with an external review team if you work with proposal managers at either Knowledge Enterprise or in engineering. And that gives you a chance to see your research objectively from the outside and thus improve it. So that's generally the way that works. Does anybody have any questions or any comments, statements? Do you have any ideas for anything for what you were thinking for, apart from what Kathleen was thinking about organizing or what she's mentioned about biodiversity? Yes, sir.
So I'm at Cowzington. I'm in CB. I have a Center for Biomediated and Bio-Inspired Geotechnics. We'd be interested in approaches to mitigate environmental impacts from the front end to the back end. We have a current project on removing phosphorus and nitrogen from surface and groundwater, partnering with a community group in Wisconsin for a demonstration project this summer. That could be one element to that, but particularly with some of our other colleagues in Sweetie who work on remediation, for the downstream end, you know, I think we could put together a pretty strong team with qualifications. But then, and then my colleague here, Julian and Leon, they work on sensors in the soil that we could use to manage application of fertilizer and irrigation. And so, you know, that's one suggestion of an end you might be able to pursue.
Sure, that's a great one. Anybody have anything to add to that? And if anybody's online, feel free to chime in. Okay, does anybody have any additional ideas that they were thinking about?
Yeah, maybe an idea. So if I see the 3 objectives, it's about securing food, but what's not in there is like the waste part of the plant, how to deal with that. So whether it's something useful to make out of the residual products which are being produced, and how to control those fluxes of materials. I'm not sure if that's would be covered within this, or it's mostly about increasing the productivity.
I think it's pretty broad, but I would say you still want to focus on those calls. But I did see that I was thinking about this because I know somebody else who was interested in something somewhat similar, only it was making new materials out of agricultural waste products. And so that could be another potential team. If you want to be on something like that, let me know, because I know who to refer you to.
Second is soil part, from a geotechnical perspective, characterizing materials where you grow your crops. That is specifically something of interest to physical characterization and the effects of different ground conditions on productivity. Not sure if that fits in or how it fits in some of those.
Okay. Those are both great ideas. Yes, sir.
So, I'm Mick Dalrymple from the operational side of the university, sustainability practices, and our particular interest is increasing the supply, the available supply of local organic foods for operational needs of campus dining services. And so one of the solutions that we've considered is the possibility of doing some kind of vertical indoor agriculture at the Polytechnic campus and using that as an anchor of a technology cluster, supply chain cluster related to that on that campus in the innovation district. And so if there are any researchers that are working on how do you do vertical indoor agriculture in an extremely hot environment, anything along those lines, or any other improvements to vertical indoor agriculture where this might fit, we'd love to partner up. Obviously, we're not research leads, but we're looking to leverage the marriage of operational needs with research and education and outreach.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that.
So one thing
yes.
I'd like to mention, the reason that I'm here is there's an opportunity in Arizona we have a lot of compost and mulch materials that are coming from the cities and urban areas. They don't have a market outlet for them. While at the same time in Pinal County, we have a group of farmers that's losing their access to water. Could we move this compost material to these farms and use it to mitigate carbon and increase their water filtration so that they don't use as much water from a statewide perspective? So if there's any way we could fold some of that in, I would love that.
Okay, and could you tell us your name and what school you're with?
Yeah, I'm Kristen Osgood. I'm with the Walton Sustainability Solution Services.
Okay.
And one thing to note too, this can be global. We just need to tie it back to the US and the importance there. So if you have international partners that we could show it piloting and working in another environment across the globe, that I would believe would strengthen applications as well.
It sounded like somebody online had something to add, Ruth.
Pete Lammers here. I'm out at the Polytechnic campus, and I wonder if you could send out a list of emails. There's some folks that have spoken up that I might want to contact, particularly with respect to vertical ag systems approach related to water and basically nitrogen and phosphorus management in systems, agriculture system. So that would be helpful. I'll send that paragraph to Kathleen, I think it was, but in addition, it'd be nice if we could get just a list of names and emails and a couple of keywords so that we can do some offline communication.
Thanks for that. I think it's a great idea to add some keywords to those paragraphs, and then I can help Kathleen culminate those into a document we could send out so everybody is has a full picture of all of the experience and ideas in the room.
And then LJ, I believe we can get the list of emails from the responses, correct, to this meeting?
Yeah, I was thinking of like providing you the registration list, and then so everyone could
That's
see
a great
who's
idea.
interested.
Yeah.
So it's not limited to who just attended today.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous idea.
And what I'm hearing is there's possibilities that you could do some sort of like sustainable Arizona thing. You probably want to go broader than that, but like I don't know if indoor ag alone would be a food system type of thing. But maybe if you're talking about doing the indoor ag thing and then combining that with transporting the mulch in Phoenix to Pinal County, that might be, you could kind of combine those two. That could be a broader project. So, and then Kathleen, if you're still on, just one last quick question. Is there going to be penalties in any sense if things appear too localized? And I'm not just picking on Arizona, because I could certainly see that happening in, say, Alabama or Wisconsin too.
I think Kathleen left.
Oh, she did.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, Tobin, she's not on. This is Suzanne.
Okay, thank you.
You know, in my mind, just from the perspective of USDA, I would say yes, we are probably not going to be able to be very successful with just a sort of singular state focused. I don't know, though, if we looked at sort of the challenges for Arizona, that doesn't apply to a lot of other regional areas, so that we could make it a little bit broader. So I'm not opposed to starting with some of the challenges in Arizona. And I think if you did have a regional view, that would be, we'd be in a better place. But you could also see tying some of the Arizona challenges to a global arid. So I don't think it would be terribly hard.
And also the RFP talks about national impact. I think I lost count of how many times it did say national and global. So I think we should definitely keep that in mind. And Suzanne, I think you're exactly right. Very easy to tie what we're doing in Arizona to a global scale.
Dave White with Sustainability and Community Development. The angle that I would be interested in participating is essentially driven by the exogenous factors of climate change and water scarcity, and the need to transition the agricultural systems in the entire Western United States. All of the agricultural systems relying on Colorado River water need to be completely reformed in the next decade to 15 years. And so that's I think everything we're talking about really in Arizona at the scale of like the 7 Western states, including California.
Do you guys know people like UNLV or UNR or any of the California schools?
Yes. Yeah. So if we wanted to put a coalition together that would be sort of a Southwest regional hub approach, I think that would be an angle. I mean, I'm in a support role to, I think, Kathleen's group, but as far as the ag interface with water policy, and if we were to bring some of the physical science, climatology, hydrology, meteorology, and then combine that with future forecasting and looking at how crops will change over time as temperatures increase, water supply availability changes, all of that. We're going to have a completely different agricultural environment in less than 20 years than we have right now.
I think the tie to the future is crucial in this call. And I also know that like DCDC has a really strong educational program that could be replicated across the Southwest with local teachers and programs that they've got there, educational components that have been, to my knowledge, very successful.
And to something Peter said earlier, the idea of what the trick we've done with NSF that's worked very well is basically create the education and outreach programs are part of the research.
Yes,
it's all kind of integrated together so that it drives that budget and the integration all into the same direction.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Extension, you actually have to have people that are in extension.
Yeah.
So if you have a former student down there, coach at the University of Arizona,
right?
You can't come to her the last second.
You know, the U of A people don't like to be added as Christmas ornaments at the last minute.
There's lots of these proposals, and it's always some of the extension people.
Yeah.
Right.
It's barrage.
Yeah. Yeah.
She wants to actually be part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's a big miss if we don't have that component at the beginning.
And I would say in closing that, yes, I agree with that. And you would say the same thing about any sort of involvement. I mean, what I frequently see and something that has to be considered is people will tack on either minority serving institutions or 1890 institutions or 1994 institutions or any of that stuff. You have to actively involve them from the beginning of your project. They aren't going to be happy if you just stick them on and add like $30,000 at the last minute. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah.
With that said, guys, I think we had a great start of a discussion. I heard some really cool ideas. We have to end it. We're already about 7 or 8 minutes over. We want to respect everybody's time. But thank you so much for coming. We're going to try to organize some stuff in the next couple of days. It probably won't be closer till Monday or Tuesday, though. And then we will send out all the lists. Certainly start thinking now, whenever over the weekend, about what you would include in that June 4th letter of intent and who would be partnered and why. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you very much, Suzanne. Can you also say thank you to Kathleen? It makes for a much better meeting when we have people with